Welcome to session 3 of Better Conversations. And in this session, we are going to move from beliefs into habits on how we can have a better conversation. But we're going to begin by focusing on what makes a good habit. We know that there are different layers to behavior change. Outcomes, we talked about, are what you get. They are the results, they are your goals. Processes, then, are what you do. They're habits, they're systems, they're routines, they're practice. And identity is what you believe. It's your worldview, it is self image, and it is bias. What I want to chat about in this session is the difference between outcome based habits and identity based habits. Outcome based habits start with the goal and work in all the other things. Identity based habits start with your identity and they work outwards. And with habit science, true behavior change that is permanent is in identity change. So let me give you some examples. If we are trying to develop identity based habits with reading, we wouldn't set our goal to read a single book, we would set it to become a better reader. If our goal was to get into running, outcome based habits would have us set up a goal to run a 5K, but identity based habits would set the goal of becoming a runner. The same thing is true with conversations. Our true goal is not to tackle a single tough conversation, it is to become a better conversationalist. Here's the danger. Sometimes, when we begin a new habit, we are often so focused on figuring out the best approach that we never get around to taking action. So it reminds me of that quote, the best is the enemy of the good. We want to focus on action over motion because motion itself will never lead to results. If all I do is outline a research article, it'll never get written. So, spending all of my time searching Instagram for recipes for a new diet is never going to be the same as beginning to eat healthy. Overall, this means that practice is greater than planning. The amount of time we spend performing a habit is not as important as the number of times that we have performed that habit. So, a rock star 10-hour conversation will never be as impactful to your better conversation habits than 100 smaller conversations. And you can see this in the habit line on the screen. Your non conscious ability to perform a behavior, that automaticity, only happens after countless repetitions. With all of that in mind, let's talk about our first better conversation habit, listening with empathy. Common sense says that the first thought that should go through our head in a partnership conversation should be, what are my conversation partners thinking and feeling about this topic we're talking about? That is empathy. But so often our rational minds get in the way of this. So the first habit we are going to talk about today is demonstrating empathy. And a lot of the strategy to do with that revolves around listening. So, we're going to talk about different strategies to support this habit of using empathy in our conversations. Our first strategy is simple but vital: commit to hearing the other person. With this commitment, we enter a conversation determined to let the other person speak. We're present in the conversation, and the byproduct of this is we don't fill up the conversation with our own words. This can be very hard for two reasons. Some people, like I, really enjoy the talking part of conversations. Another reason this is sometimes difficult has to do with technology. When a device is put between ourselves and a conversation partner, sometimes our presence in a conversation is often split. There are practical ways that you can shift to being the listener too. We can make a conscious decision to care about what our conversation partners have to say. So you can pose questions to the person you're talking to. And if you think of every interaction with people as a way to let the other person either tell you something you didn't know about the person or about life, you're going to remember a whole lot more and you're going to learn a lot more. So I started this idea day journal with my kids where we jot down each and every day something that we learned. And it's amazing how much it has made me feel that every day comes with it some learning opportunities. So, looking through our summer entries from the other week, I discovered that I learned what different types of plastics were after my son Pippin wondered which could be recycled and which couldn't. I learned the difference between an acronym and initialism. And it turns out I also learned how to open beer bottles without a bottle opener. So the same is true with our conversations. Become the listener, and you learn so much more about your conversation partners. Even if you commit to being the best listener in the world, if you respond in a way that doesn't fit the sentiment of your audience, your listening becomes moot. For instance, if I'm listening to a slew of ideas and I respond with, "Oh, that'll never work. I already tried something like that and it went terrible," then I may have listened, but my comment has the same impact as not listening because my word choice and my tone demonstrated that my partner's words had no value. And a way around this is to ask yourself, will what I'm about to say either open up or close down a conversation? If the answer is closing down the conversation, try and find another way to respond it. Or don't say anything. Frances Hesselbein says that most people think of listening as something that we do during these moments when we're not talking, but it's actually a two-part maneuver. There's the part where we actually listen, and then there's the part where we speak. And speaking establishes how we are perceived both as a listener, and what we say is proof of how well we listen. So there are two sides of the same coin. Depending on your personality, this is either the easiest or the hardest of the four strategies. Or it's also the smallest form of the habit, if you want to think about it that way. When we interrupt others, we are unconsciously showing that we believe what they are saying doesn't matter as much as our own comments. All of these ideas represent the second level of listening. This is what happens when we take the unconscious task of conversation and instead we begin to think and observe and reflect on it. We're beginning with the habit of demonstrating empathy because so much of communication depends on understanding others. When we can demonstrate empathy, we are able to see beyond our unconscious and we begin to see others as the unique subjects that they are. And this is the habit that I want to encourage you to begin practicing in this session.